Did you know that heart disease, the #1 killer in American society, is just about totally preventable and largely reversible? And did you know that you can do more for yourself than any physician, hospital, drug, surgery to take care of this disease? We have a choice. I'm going to share with you what to do.
2012 is not a time for moderation and compromise. We're in an extreme position, and God is giving you an opportunity to save yourself, your family, your humanity, and this planet. But that window of opportunity is very, very small.
Completely changed the landscape of what we're dealing with. And scientists are now in pretty firm agreement that environmental pollutants and chemical exposures play a profound role in almost every complex disease, and that the effects of these chemical exposures can be so profound that one small exposure very early in life, perhaps even before birth, can stay with that individual throughout life and even into subsequent generations.
We could stop eating animals today. It doesn't have to take 20 years. And instead of $18 trillion, it costs nothing. That's the prescription to mitigate, not adapt to, but mitigate climate change.
When the American Academy of Environmental Medicine evaluated the animal feeding studies on GMOs, they found that there was clear causal evidence linking GM feed to reproductive disorders, immune system problems, accelerated aging, organ damage, gastrointestinal problems, and dysfunctional regulation of cholesterol and insulin. They urged all doctors to prescribe non-GMO diets to all patients. Now we have thousands of doctors doing just that, and they're reporting that their patients are getting better along these same categories of diseases.
With inflammations of any kind is that our body is so acidic that inflammation happens. So we want to be on an alkaline diet. The green juices we make here that have sunflower sprouts, pea sprouts, celery, cucumber is enormously good to that. Wheatgrass juice, of course, is super alkaline.
Look, having a normal cholesterol in a society where it's normal to drop dead of a heart attack, not necessarily a good thing. And remember, it's our #1 killer, right? In a huge study last year, most heart attack patients fell within the recommended targets for cholesterol, demonstrating that the current diet guidelines just not low enough to cut heart attack risk. Close to half of heart attack victims had cholesterol levels classified in the guidelines as optimal.
I think some of the most compelling evidence actually comes from Australia, from the laboratory of John Aitken, who has shown that sperm from healthy men, when split into 2 samples, will die 3 times faster and have 3 times more damage on the DNA of the sperm after exposure to cell phone radiation. Other work has been done also in Australia by surgeons Vinnie Karuna and Charlie Teo, who have looked at all of the world's literature on this subject and concluded that on average people who use cell phones heavily unfortunately have a doubled or greater risk of brain cancer overall. And then finally there's the work of Bruce Armstrong, among others, looking at large studies done over time in 13 different countries, which also confirm the views of Drs. Corona and Teo that long-term regular use of cell phones puts one at risk of brain cancer.
My health issues required that I take control of my diet. And I went straight vegan. I went all raw. And I started to buy organic food, but organic food was very pricey and it was hard to get. This was the 70s. And so I started to grow my own organic food. And that's when I started to accumulate people, all the people, family and friends around me. They were looking at me and saying, "This is really impressive. You're growing fresh food like a backyard, like a garden."
My name is Sherry Soria, and I'm the founder of Living Light Culinary Institute. I started this school 15 years ago. I've been teaching vegetarian culinary arts for 40 years. I'm going to be 66. And so I've had a lot of experience with vegetarian cuisine in my life. 20 years ago, I changed to a raw food diet, and that took me to the next level of being energetic and vibrant, and has really slowed down aging. because I have seen other people in my family who have continued aging at an accelerated rate compared to myself.
But I have found that almost invariably when people see the science, when they see the overwhelming evidence that cow's milk is loaded with toxins that are very dangerous, environmental contaminants, and actually powerful growth hormones and such that may elevate our risk for disease, that they become convinced that this really is not.
Chemistry of the planet, from the cellular level to entire ecosystems, is now different than at any other time in history.
You know, the process of genetic engineering causes massive collateral damage in the DNA. And so there could be hundreds or thousands of mutations.
In the DNA of the potato.
Of the plant, right. So the corn, for example, has a new allergen. Monsanto's BT corn has a completely new allergen that was not evaluated by the FDA or anyone and only found out afterward.
Now in Europe and North America, 50% of the population, 1/2 of the population will get cancer in your lifetime.
We now know with endocrine disruptors that very low levels of these materials, these substances, can have a profound effect.
Low risk, we want no risk. How do you do it? Well, for the buildup of plaque in our arteries to cease, it appears that we have to get our total cholesterol down to be about 150, right? In other words, the cholesterol must be lowered to that of your average pure vegetarian.
250 cleanest bodies of water on the planet Earth are heavily contaminated with pharmaceutical drugs, plastics, and a wide array of other man-made chemicals.
25 million acres last year by combination of deforestation and degradation. That's tragic. This is what a few thousand to a million-year-old rainforest now looks like because the world's food priorities are with eating livestock, not with being stewards of other living things, as we should be. This is the sad result. Soon grass, pasture, and cattle will follow this in, usually erosion, desertification, and localized climate change as well. If you choose to eat livestock here in the US or anywhere else, you're going to be supporting this destruction by fueling the global demand for meat. And yet, who here doesn't know that? Well, if everyone knows this, why are we still eating fish? Fragile, interdependent, and poorly understood ecosystems have been devastated. Over 90 million tons of fish were caught last year, with quite a few more millions of tons of bykill, which are all those other innocent sea life caught, killed, and discarded in the process of trying to catch that target of fish everyone's asking for.
It's always surprising to people to learn that when you look around the world, it's actually the very countries that are consuming the most milk and consuming the most calcium in their diet who have the highest risk of developing a bone fracture. So that would be like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, North America, the Western European nations. That's where we see all the bone disease. But the inverse is so as well. So populations in China, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, people don't have milk mustaches. They're not obsessing over how much calcium they're eating. They eat very little dairy in general. That's where we see the greatest protection, the lowest risk of suffering a bone fracture. And men and women in their 7th and 8th decade of life have strong, robust bones. They're out, they're active, they're moving around, they're lifting up their grandchildren, they're working in fields and enjoying a healthy life. Well, contrary to the message that we've been given from a very young age, cow's milk is not a guarantee of protection from bone fracture. And when you look around the world at the epidemiology, it becomes really clear that in fact it's the populations where the most milk and the most calcium is consumed that we see the highest risk of fracture.
FDA just announced newly mandated safety labeling by law to cholesterol-lowering statin drugs, right? So this is Lipitor, Mevacor, Crestor, Zocor, Vytorin, that kind of thing. The FDA issued new side effect warning labels this year regarding the increased risks, brain-related risks, associated memory loss and confusion, an increase in blood sugar levels, as well as new onset diabetes. One prominent cardiologist described this kind of Faustian bargain: yes, fewer heart attacks, but more diabetes, right? With all the memory loss and confusion caused by these drugs, folks may have forgot there's actually a way to reduce the risk of heart attacks and diabetes at the same time. call it the plant-based diet.
It's really simple and really fun. If it's not simple and fun, you're not going to do it. So we're really going to make it as simple as possible. What foods to eat, what not foods not to eat, and also what foods we eat on a daily basis, because we're really busy people. We own 4 businesses. We have 40 employees. We've written a lot of books. We travel all over the world, and you know, we need to keep our energy up.
You see, we are born with clean arteries, and after 20 years on a Western rich diet, you already have 20% narrowing. This is what we find in 20-year-olds. Now, when we spent some time in China, we looked for the same atherosclerotic process in people. People that died, of course. We look at the arteries, and we find 20% narrowing in Chinese farmers at the age of 85. So this is a disease that perhaps has to do with race. Does it? Let's take a look at the Japanese. After World War II, it was virtually unheard of to find coronary artery disease in Japan. It was so rare in Japan that the University of Tokyo actually had to purchase coronary arteries from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore so they could show medical students in Japan what killed every 3rd American. Think of it. Unheard of in Japan after World War II. They lived on a very simple diet. They had just gone through the war with all the stress, and yet heart disease was virtually unheard of. Today, Japan no longer imports coronary arteries from Johns Hopkins University. Today, they have McDonald's. They have the fast foods. They have the basically Western diet. And with that, they also have heart disease and strokes and all the things that come with this.